When using the STAR approach to answer interview questions, there are actually sub-questions under each letter of the acronym that hiring managers or recruiters expect you to answer. I'm going to take you through the STAR approach and how we should be using the approach based on what recruiters will want to hear. I would also be taking you through example questions based on different job competencies and also teach you how you could find those questions yourself and use them to prepare ahead for the interview. So stay tuned. So let's talk about situation. So one mistake that I see people do is that they do not give enough context when they're answering some interview questions. You should be able to relate when the situation occurred, where it occurred, who was involved, what was your role, and most importantly, what job title that you had when you were dealing with the particular situation, because this sets the tone for the rest of your answers. If you're an immigrant, this is also important because your context may be very different from the context here in Canada. So you want to be able to ensure that your interviewer understands where you're coming from. Key thing to take note is when you're describing a situation, you should always describe why that particular situation arose, if there is a context, or why that particular situation needed to be resolved. Some context onto why that situation is important or why the expected outcomes of that situation is important is a really good way to go. The second acronym T stands for task. And so it's important for you to be as specific as possible in terms of what were the tasks that needed to be accomplished. I see sometimes people would say the team had to do this, the team had to do this. It's okay to be part of a team, but what were the tasks that you were supposed to accomplish? Because that's the point of the interview. They want to know what you are capable of doing, not what the team is capable of doing. So you have to be specific in terms of like what tasks you were supposed to accomplish. And it's not just about mentioning what task you were supposed to accomplish, but also mentioning what were the key outcomes that were supposed to come out from that task. So what did success look like in that task? And possibly, if you have a reason why you in particular were selected for that task. Do you have a special skill set that others in the team do not have? So actually using that as an opportunity to mention some of the strengths on why you were assigned a particular task, this is where you should put it in. So for example, I could say things along the line, given my strong background in project management methodologies or research or analysis, whatever your strength is, I was given the task to do this because I already had a track record of doing all of this excellently in the past. Some of the key outcomes I was expected to achieve were 1, 2, 3. And these outcomes were important because interviewing is a lot like storytelling. And so you want to make sure that, you're not assuming that the interviewer or the hiring manager knows you, or even if it's someone that you've worked with before, to be able to tell your story wholesomely and give all of the details as much as possible. Let's go to actions. So when you're describing your actions, you should logically take the interviewer through all of the steps that you actually took to resolve a problem or approach a particular situation. It's important that you're not using we, use I. A mistake that people usually make is you're not just listing your actions that you took, you're also giving the reason behind those actions. Because again, the panel or the hiring manager wants to understand how you make decisions, your thought process. So communicating your actions and also giving reasons for why you took those particular actions is one of the great ways to go. So what did you do? What did you say? If you took a particular approach, why did you select that approach? What informed that approach? Did you consult with somebody? Who did you consult with somebody? Why did you not decide to consult with somebody? Did you encounter any challenges? And when you encountered challenges, how did you deal with those challenges? Please take your interview through your process in terms of why you made certain decisions and who was involved in those decisions. Let's talk about results. So one of the things that you should definitely do explicitly is describe the accomplishments that were made and also describe what results came out from the event or from the situation. You can also go on to talk about, what lessons you learned from the situation and what lessons you're applying going forward if you encounter similar situations. Because that shows again that you're self-reflective and you're able to transfer learnings from one situation to the another situation. Something else you should always think about is, if there was such a great positive outcome, and then you received commendations from either like your manager or your colleagues or even your stakeholders, you should also include it, because those sort of reviews also show that you handled the situation correctly. So these are some of the things you should be spotlighting in your results. Another thing you could also add is, you can also talk about how you felt about the outcome. In not all cases that everything has to be so positive. Of course, things happen and, it doesn't go as we planned. So you can talk about how you felt about the situation and, what lessons, tying back to the lessons learned, what lessons you'll be applying going forward. You can also spotlight if the results that you achieved was better than you imagined. Because again, going into this, you had a particular task, you had the outcomes you wanted to achieve, you did a series of actions to address it. So the results that you achieved, are they in line with what you originally thought, or were they even better? Now that you have these bullet points under each of the acronym, when next you're preparing for your next interview, write it out. So sometimes I think we always feel that we have all of the answers in our head and we would remember everything, but it doesn't always work that way. So when you're preparing for your interview, have a Word document with your example questions, write out the STAR approach and the bullet points you would want to cover under each acronym, and then write out your answers and make sure that you're actually reflecting on the answers to ensure that you're covering each of this. So now let's talk about what kind of questions you should be expecting when you're going in for an interview. So remember the job profile that we looked at in our first two videos. And if you haven't watched the video, you better go watch them. Whenever you're applying for a government job and they have a job profile and you have the list of competencies in that job profile, the questions in your interview are going to be pertaining to those job competencies, because again, they want to assess you if you have those competencies for the role. And something about behavioral competencies, they're not asking you, what would you do in this situation? They're asking you, what did you do when you experience this situation? So it's not hypothetical, but they expect real concrete answers of what you've done in the past. So that is why it's important that you should look through the job profile, identify the competencies, and then start working through the example questions with the STAR approach and writing them out. Something that people do not always know about is that you can actually search the government website to get the full meaning of these competencies, such as this. Here we're able to see the breakdown of what result orientation means. It gives you an additional insight of what the interviewers are expecting to hear when they ask you about a question that's under result orientation. Let's talk about example interview questions, which I'm sure you've been burning to know. Do you know you can actually search on the government website for example interview questions? So most government organizations, most provinces have example questions on their website. You just have to search for it. So in the description, I've put some of the example questions from the government of BC, government of Ontario, government of Alberta, where you can go through and then you would see, based on the competencies, the type of questions that can be asked for each competency. And so when you're preparing for your interview, it doesn't mean you have to prepare for each and every question, but there are some times that, some questions are so similar that you can use the same scenario to answer them. So you can start to do that grouping ahead of your interview. And so that prepares your mind that although you may not be asked exactly the same question, you have a similar question which you're already prepared for, which you can quickly switch and use it to answer the question during the interview. If all of this has been helpful, please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you.